Michael Johnson, one of the wealthiest men in his city, thought he had everything until a tragic accident took away his wife and son, leaving him devastated. To cope with the guilt, Michael dedicated his life to philanthropy, hoping to bring joy to those in need. But during a visit to an orphanage, something unexpected happened. Among the children, he saw a boy who looked just like him as a child. This uncanny resemblance triggered memories and emotions he thought were long buried. As Michael delved deeper into the boy's story, he discovered a series of coincidences that would lead to a shocking revelation, changing his life forever. If you are not subscribed, I recommend you subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. In a twist of fate that would leave even the coldest heart stirred, a wealthy tycoon found himself standing in an orphanage where a young boy's innocent gaze pierced his soul, reminding him of the child he once was. Michael Johnson, revered as one of the most prosperous and powerful figures in his city, had climbed the ladder of success through shrewd real estate investments. By the age of 39, he was not only known for his towering financial empire, but also for his tireless efforts to uplift those less fortunate. Deep within, Michael held a conviction that acts of kindness could mend the broken, lighting up the world with hope and warmth. From an early age, Michael had always been fiercely driven, determined to escape the poverty that shadowed his upbringing. But in the pursuit of wealth, Michael's heart had hardened. He had become blinded by ambition, consumed by the chase for more. Money was his sole focus, and everything else was secondary. It wasn't until he met Andrea, a gentle and caring woman who saw the goodness buried within him, that a different side of Michael began to emerge. They married, and their son, Joseph, became the light of Michael's life, softening the edges of his relentless drive. Yet life, in its cruel way, dealt Michael a devastating blow. 6 years ago, a tragic accident took Andrea and Joseph away from him, leaving him shattered and lost. The accident was his fault. He had dozed off behind the wheel after a late-night party. The guilt gnawed at him every sleepless night, a constant reminder that no amount of money could ever bring back what he had lost. In the years that followed, Michael's life took a different path. Grief-stricken and remorseful, he vowed to use his wealth for good, pouring his fortune into building schools and hospitals and supporting charities. The pursuit of riches no longer defined him. Instead, he found solace in making a meaningful difference in the lives of others. One chilly December morning, Michael decided to visit a nearby orphanage managed by a woman named Elizabeth. From the moment he stepped through the doors, he was greeted with warmth by Elizabeth, whose kind smile and empathetic nature made the orphanage feel like a haven of love, despite its modest means. As they toured the facility, Michael saw the stark realities the children faced: lack of funding, scarce resources, and a desperate need for more hands to care for them. The sight tugged at his heartstrings, memories of his son flashing before his eyes. As they talked, Elizabeth mentioned how she longed to give the children a magical Christmas, something they had never experienced before. Her eyes sparkled with hope as she spoke, and Michael, moved by her dedication, immediately promised to make it happen. The idea of bringing joy to those children filled him with a renewed sense of purpose. Without hesitation, he vowed to create an unforgettable Christmas celebration, one that would surprise the children and leave them with memories they'd cherish forever. With a heart full of determination, Michael threw himself into the preparations. He brought in experts to design a winter wonderland, hired a jolly Santa Claus, ordered a towering Christmas tree, and personally selected gifts for each child. His once cold and calculating office transformed into a festive workshop, buzzing with the spirit of the season. No detail was too small, no expense too great. Michael wanted every child to feel the warmth of love and the magic of the holidays. He imagined the joy on their faces as they unwrapped their presents, and for the first time in years, he felt a sense of peace. As the celebration drew closer, Michael found himself reflecting on his journey. He remembered how Andrea had always spoken about the importance of giving back, a message he had once dismissed as idealistic. But now, he understood her words with profound clarity. The lavish Christmas preparations symbolized not just his wealth but the profound change within him. Michael was no longer just a millionaire driven by material success. He had become a man who recognized the true power of compassion, love, and selfless giving. With Christmas just around the corner, Michael was a bundle of nerves, but he was also filled with an overwhelming sense of anticipation. This event wasn't just about bringing happiness to a group of children. It was about filling a deep void in his heart, a void left by years of guilt and sorrow. The thought of seeing those children's faces light up with joy was a beacon of hope for Michael, a chance to find the redemption he so desperately sought. What he didn't realize, though, was that this act of kindness would lead to an encounter so profound that it would alter the course of his life in ways he could never have imagined. As he tied up the final loose ends for the celebration, Michael's gaze fell on an old photograph that sat prominently on his desk. It was a picture of Andrea and Joseph, their smiles frozen in time. For the first time in years, he felt an intimate connection with them, as if they were guiding him, urging him to keep moving forward. This was more than just a holiday party. It was Michael's way of honoring their memory through meaningful actions that would ripple out into the lives of others, creating a legacy far richer than wealth. Finally, the day arrived. The orphanage buzzed with electric energy, as if every corner was alive with excitement and anticipation. The children, their eyes wide with wonder, could barely contain themselves. The entire place had been transformed into a festive wonderland, garlands draped across the walls, twinkling lights casting a warm glow, and a towering Christmas tree adorned with sparkling ornaments standing as the centerpiece of it all. The scent of freshly baked cookies and rich hot chocolate wafted through the air, completing the picture-perfect scene. Michael arrived early, leading his team and a professional Santa Claus who looked as if he had stepped straight out of a storybook, complete with a bright red suit and a fluffy white beard. The children erupted in joy at the sight of Santa, their laughter echoing through the halls as they rushed forward to greet him. Elizabeth, the director, welcomed Michael and his team with open arms, her eyes brimming with gratitude. "Welcome, welcome," she said warmly. "The children are thrilled. They have no idea what's in store for them." Michael couldn't help but smile, feeling the infectious energy of the children wash over him. He had poured his heart into planning this event, and now, seeing the joy in these children's eyes, he knew it had all been worth it. As the gift-giving began, the children eagerly lined up, their faces glowing with anticipation. Santa called out each child's name, handing them beautifully wrapped gifts that were met with squeals of delight and astonished gasps. Michael stood back, a broad smile stretching across his face as he watched the scene unfold. His heart swelled with a warmth he hadn't felt in years. As he moved around the room, engaging with the children, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Every smile, every burst of laughter was a reminder of why he had chosen this path of philanthropy, a path that had brought him more peace than any amount of money ever could. Then, out of the corner of his eye, Michael noticed a boy sitting alone, away from the lively crowd. The child had disheveled brown hair and large, curious eyes that seemed to take in everything around him with quiet intensity. There was something about the boy's demeanor, a certain melancholy, that drew Michael in. He decided to approach, carrying a specially wrapped gift. "Hello, may I sit with you?" Michael asked softly. The boy didn't respond, his gaze fixed on the floor. Undeterred, Michael sat down beside him and extended the gift. "This is for you. I hope it brings you joy." The boy hesitated, his small hands trembling slightly as he accepted the gift. Slowly, he unwrapped the package to reveal a sleek remote-controlled car. His eyes widened with amazement. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "You're very welcome," Michael replied, his voice warm. "What's your name?" Matthew, the boy answered, his focus still on the toy, his fingers tracing its smooth surface with reverence. But when Matthew finally lifted his gaze, Michael felt the blood drain from his face. The boy's eyes, those eyes, stared back at him like a reflection from a distant memory. The resemblance was uncanny, as if he were looking at a younger version of himself. The same innocent face, the same soulful eyes that once held the world's possibilities. Michael's heart raced, and a cold sweat formed on his brow. His hands began to tremble slightly as he struggled to maintain his composure. "Do you like remote-controlled cars?" Michael managed to ask, his voice betraying the emotions swirling within him. Matthew nodded enthusiastically, his smile growing wider. "Yes, very much. I've always wanted one, but I never had the chance." At that moment, Michael realized that this encounter was no mere coincidence. Something deeper was at play, something that transcended the here and now. As he looked into Matthew's eyes, he felt an inexplicable connection, a bond that went beyond the physical resemblance. It was as if fate had brought them together, intertwining their stories in a way that neither could yet understand. Michael inhaled deeply, attempting to steady himself as a whirlwind of emotions swirled within him. The sight of Matthew, a young boy with striking similarities to his late son Joseph, sent a shockwave through his heart. The uncanny resemblance was more than unsettling. It was as if time itself had bent back upon him, resurrecting memories he had long buried. After distributing the last of the gifts, Michael found himself needing answers, his thoughts consumed by the boy who seemed to be a ghost of his past. He stood up with a sense of urgency and sought out Elizabeth. He had to understand who Matthew was and why he felt such an inexplicable connection to him. "Elizabeth, do you have a minute?" Michael asked, his voice betraying the tension he felt. He located her near the Christmas tree, where she was organizing decorations. "Certainly, Michael. You seem troubled. What's on your mind?" Elizabeth responded, her eyes scanning his face for clues. "I encountered a boy here. His name is Matthew. There's something about him. He reminds me of someone from my past, someone I thought I'd never see again. Can you tell me more about him?" Elizabeth studied Michael for a moment before leading him to a quieter area away from the festive noise. "Matthew is 7 years old," she began gently. "He's been with us since infancy. We don't know exactly when he was born. All we have is a note that came with him, saying his parents died in an accident. Whoever left him here wasn't able to care for him." Elizabeth's explanation hit Michael like a cold wave, sending a chill down his spine. He managed to thank her, but his mind was already spinning with the implications. Needing space to think, he left the orphanage and drove home, his heart heavy with confusion and dread. Once home, Michael reached for an old family photo, the one that had always brought both comfort and pain. It captured a moment from before the accident that had shattered his life. 6 years ago, he had dozed off at the wheel, and when he awoke from the coma 3 months later, he was told that his wife Andrea and son Joseph had not survived. The guilt had been a relentless torment ever since, and now, with Matthew's arrival in his life, the weight of that guilt seemed to double. There were too many parallels to ignore. He had to dig deeper to uncover the truth about this boy who felt like a living echo of his child. In the days that followed, Michael's restlessness grew unbearable. Thoughts of Matthew and the eerie likeness between them gnawed at him constantly, disrupting his sleep and consuming his waking hours. Finally, driven by a mix of hope and fear, he arranged a meeting with his trusted lawyer, Richard Morales. Richard had been a steady presence through many of Michael's darkest moments, and Michael knew he could rely on him now. As he stepped into Richard's polished office, he was greeted warmly, the familiarity providing a brief, but much-needed, comfort. "Michael, it's good to see you," Richard said, standing to shake his hand. "What brings you here today?" Michael settled into the leather chair opposite Richard's desk, trying to organize the chaotic thoughts swirling in his mind. After a deep breath, he began to explain, his voice tinged with both uncertainty and determination. Richard, I met a boy at the orphanage where I've been volunteering. His name is Matthew. He's 7 years old, and when I look at him, it's like staring at a younger version of myself. I can't shake the feeling that there's something more to this. I want to know who he is, and if possible, I want to adopt him. Richard listened intently, his expression growing more somber as Michael spoke. He knew all too well the tragedy that had scarred Michael's life, and the weight of his words was palpable. Michael, I hear you. Adoption is a significant commitment, but before we proceed, we need to thoroughly understand the legalities involved. Given that Matthew's background is so murky, the process could be lengthy and complicated. Michael nodded, a knot tightening in his stomach as he realized the challenges ahead. I'm aware this won't be easy, but I need to do it right. I don't know where to begin, though. Richard picked up a pen and began making notes, his tone thoughtful. First, we'll need to collect every piece of documentation related to Matthew from the orphanage. Once we have that, we can file the adoption petition. Be prepared, Michael, this could take many months, perhaps even over a year. He paused, meeting Michael's gaze directly. There's one thing we could explore to potentially expedite the process. If there's any chance of a biological connection between you and Matthew, it could simplify matters considerably. Have you considered a DNA test? The suggestion sent a jolt through Michael, leaving him both hopeful and terrified. The idea that Matthew might be his son was almost too much to process. Richard, I'm not sure how to feel about that. The boy resembles me, yes, but how could he be my biological child? The only family I had was Andrea, and she's gone, along with Joseph. I don't see how Matthew could be mine. As he spoke, Michael's mind raced with a mix of emotions: fear, longing, guilt, and an odd sense of destiny. Whether or not Matthew was truly his son, the boy had awakened something deep within him, something that demanded he uncover the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Richard nodded with understanding as he sensed Michael's hesitation. I get it, Michael. It's a lot to take in, but let's not rule out any possibilities just yet. If you ever decide to explore that option, I'll be here to guide you through it. Michael appreciated the lawyer's support and stood up, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He needed time to process everything they had discussed. As he reached the door, Richard's voice gently called after him, Michael, I know this is hard, but sometimes the truth hides in the most unexpected places. If you feel a connection with Matthew, it's worth considering every avenue. This could be about giving that boy a brighter future, and maybe even finding peace for yourself. Michael stopped for a moment, absorbing Richard's words. Deep down, he knew the lawyer was right. The uncertainty gnawed at him, the unanswered questions weighing on his heart like a heavy burden. Thank you, Richard. I'll think it over. For now, I'll focus on the adoption process. I want to give Matthew the life he deserves. Richard gave a reassuring smile, his voice filled with confidence. We'll make it happen, Michael. I'm with you every step of the way. Leaving Richard's office, Michael's mind was still a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. The idea of a DNA test lingered in his thoughts, stirring a mixture of fear and hope that he couldn't quite shake. But for now, his resolve was clear. He would focus on the adoption, determined to give Matthew a chance at a better life. As he drove home, his thoughts kept returning to the photo of his family, a haunting reminder of all he had lost. He knew the road ahead would be long and filled with challenges, but he was committed to uncovering the truth and, if destiny willed it, bringing Matthew into his life. There was something about this boy, something profound that he couldn't ignore, and he wouldn't rest until he understood the connection. Despite his decision, Michael's unease only grew. The questions surrounding Matthew haunted him, their answers seeming just out of reach. Unable to shake the feeling that there was more to this than met the eye, Michael made the difficult decision to go beyond the adoption process. He needed more information, something definitive. He decided to hire a private investigator to delve deeper into Matthew's past. Luis Vasquez, a seasoned investigator known for his expertise in unraveling complicated cases, came highly recommended. Michael set up a meeting with him at his discreet office, a space cluttered with case files and surveillance gear. "Mr. Johnson, it's an honor to meet you. I hear you've got quite an intriguing case for me," Luis said, shaking Michael's hand firmly as they settled into the office. "Yes, Luis. Thank you for meeting me on such short notice. I need your help to dig up everything possible about a boy named Matthew who's living in an orphanage. He's 7 years old, and his past is shrouded in mystery. I need to know who his biological parents were and how he ended up at the orphanage. There's an unsettling resemblance between him and my late son, and I can't rest until I have some answers." Luis listened carefully, his expression serious as he took out a notebook and began jotting down the key details. "Understood. We'll start by gathering the basics. I'll need access to the orphanage records and any other documentation you have. From there, I'll trace every lead we can find." Michael handed over a folder containing copies of the documents Elizabeth had provided. Luis quickly scanned through them, his mind already piecing together a plan of action. "I'll begin with the orphanage, speak to the director, and review the records. I'll also dig around for any information that might not be in these files. We may need to check local hospitals and even sift through old newspaper archives for anything that could be relevant." Over the next few days, Luis dove headfirst into the investigation, starting with the orphanage. He interviewed Elizabeth, who shared everything she knew about Matthew, including the note that had accompanied him. Luis meticulously photographed the note and copied every document, searching for even the smallest clue. His next stop was the local hospital, where he scoured records for any trace of a baby abandoned around the time Matthew was brought to the orphanage. He also combed through newspaper archives, hoping to find reports of accidents or incidents that might link to Matthew's mysterious past. As his investigation progressed, Luis uncovered a few intriguing details. One significant discovery was a report of a serious car accident that occurred around the same time Matthew was left at the orphanage. The report mentioned a couple who died in the crash, but curiously, there was no record of a child being involved. This discrepancy caught Luis's attention. It seemed to align with the story Michael had been told by Elizabeth, yet there was still so much left unexplained. Luis compiled all the information he had gathered, aware that this was only the beginning of what could be a very complex case. He remained confident that with patience and persistence, he could unearth the answers Michael so desperately needed. Meanwhile, Michael decided to spend more time at the orphanage, eager to build a relationship with Matthew as they awaited the results of the investigation. Each visit brought him closer to the boy, and the connection between them grew stronger, even as it deepened the mystery. During those initial visits, Michael kept things light, bringing along toys and games that brought smiles to the children's faces. Slowly, Matthew began to warm up to him, though his natural shyness still held him back from fully opening up. Yet with every visit, the bond between them felt increasingly natural, almost inevitable, as if fate had brought them together for reasons yet unknown. On a bright and cheerful Saturday morning, Michael arrived at the orphanage with a special surprise: a brand new soccer ball. Knowing how much Matthew loved soccer, he hoped this would be the perfect way to connect with the boy on a deeper level. "Hey Matthew, how about a little soccer today?" Michael asked with a warm smile, holding up the ball invitingly. Matthew's eyes lit up with interest, but a shadow of hesitation still lingered. "I like soccer, but I usually play alone," Matthew replied softly, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "Well, how about we change that today? We can team up and see who scores more goals," Michael suggested, his tone light and encouraging. He wanted to make sure Matthew felt comfortable, so he kept things easygoing. Matthew hesitated for a moment, then nodded shyly and followed Michael to the small field behind the orphanage. They started slowly, with Michael letting Matthew set the pace. As the game went on, Matthew began to loosen up, his confidence growing with each kick of the ball. He even showed off some impressive dribbles, his natural talent shining through. Michael, though not as skilled, found himself genuinely enjoying the game. The connection he felt with Matthew grew stronger with every passing minute. After an hour of playing, both were winded but smiling, their laughter still echoing across the field. They collapsed onto the grass to catch their breath, and Michael seized the moment to learn more about the boy who had captured his heart. "You're really good, Matthew." "Have you been practicing for a long time?" Michael asked, eager to dive deeper into Matthew's world. Matthew's face brightened with pride. "Yeah, I've been playing since I was little. Whenever I get the chance, I'm out here kicking the ball around. It makes me feel ... free," he said, his voice filled with a sense of quiet joy. Michael nodded, understanding the comfort Matthew found in the game. "I get that. Everyone needs something that makes them feel free. Besides soccer, what else do you enjoy doing?" he asked, genuinely curious. "I like reading adventure stories and playing with toy cars. Sometimes I draw too," Matthew said, a hint of excitement creeping into his voice. "I like imagining faraway places and then drawing them." "That's incredible, Matthew. I'd love to see your drawings sometime," Michael replied, his enthusiasm unmistakable. The thought of seeing Matthew's artwork, of glimpsing the worlds he created in his mind, filled Michael with a deep sense of connection. Matthew nodded again, a shy smile spreading across his face. "Maybe next time you visit," he offered. From that day on, Michael's visits to the orphanage became a cherished routine. Each time he arrived, the children flocked to him, but he always made sure to spend quality time with Matthew. They continued to play soccer, read books, and as promised, Matthew proudly shared his drawings. Michael was amazed by the boy's imagination. His sketches were filled with fantastical landscapes, epic adventures, and characters that seemed to leap off the page. As their bond deepened, Matthew began to open up about his dreams, revealing his wish to become either a professional soccer player or a renowned artist. He spoke of traveling the world, seeing new places, and living a life full of adventure. Michael listened with rapt attention, offering words of encouragement and reassurance that such dreams were within reach. Each conversation left a lasting impression on both of them. For Matthew, Michael's visits became the highlight of his days, something to look forward to with eager anticipation. For Michael, these visits brought healing and joy, filling a void in his heart that he hadn't realized could be filled. The relationship that blossomed between them was more than just a friendship. It was a bond that felt destined, and Michael knew he was on the right path. Matthew was no longer just a boy at the orphanage. He had become an irreplaceable part of Michael's life. With every visit, Michael grew more determined to make this connection permanent, to ensure that Matthew would never feel alone again. While Michael nurtured this growing bond, Lewis continued his relentless investigation. He spent countless hours digging through dusty files, interviewing hospital staff, and speaking with locals who might hold a piece of the puzzle. After weeks of painstaking work, Lewis finally uncovered a critical lead. On a gray and drizzly afternoon, as he pored over old medical records, one document in particular caught his eye. It was a report from 6 years ago, detailing a tragic car accident that had claimed the lives of a couple. But there was an unexpected detail that made Lewis's heart skip. A handwritten note at the bottom of the report read, "Male infant found at the scene, transported to hospital for evaluation." Lewis's discovery sent a chill down his spine. This could be the missing piece, the key to unraveling the mystery surrounding Matthew's origins. He knew he had to proceed carefully, but he also knew that this revelation could change everything for Michael and Matthew. Lewis felt his pulse quicken as the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. This could be the breakthrough he had been chasing for weeks. Determined to uncover the truth, he gained access to the hospital's admission records from that fateful time. What he found both clarified and deepened the mystery. While the records confirmed that a baby had indeed been brought to the hospital, they abruptly vanished from the system shortly after the initial admission. It was as if the child had disappeared without a trace. Armed with this disturbing information, Lewis compiled all the evidence and arranged an urgent meeting with Michael. In the quiet of Michael's office, the tension was palpable as Lewis began to present his findings. "Mr. Johnson, I've uncovered some information that I believe is critical to understanding Matthew's past. I discovered records of a car accident that occurred around the same time Matthew was left at the orphanage. The report mentioned a couple who died in the accident, and a baby was taken to the hospital. The baby's records align with Matthew's age and situation," Lewis explained, his voice steady but charged with the gravity of the situation. Michael listened, his heart pounding in his chest. The coincidences were chilling. "What else did you find?" Lewis, he asked, his voice tight with anxiety. Lewis took a deep breath before continuing. "There's something even more startling in the hospital records. The names of the deceased parents listed are Andrea and Michael. I know this seems impossible, but these are the exact names in the documents." Michael's world seemed to tilt on its axis as the words sank in. Andrea and Michael, his name and the name of his deceased wife. How could this be? How could there be a record of their names connected to an accident involving a baby? "This doesn't make any sense," Lewis, Michael said, his voice trembling with disbelief. "I was in that accident. Andrea died and our son Joseph died too. I was in a coma for 3 months, and when I woke up, they were already gone. They were buried while I was unconscious." Lewis nodded, his face a mask of concern and confusion. "I understand, Mr. Johnson. I was just as perplexed when I first saw it. But these are the names in the documents. We need to dig deeper to make sense of this. There could be an error, or there might be something we're overlooking. We need to access more hospital records, or perhaps find witnesses who can shed light on this anomaly." Michael sat in stunned silence, the pieces of the puzzle shifting in ways he had never anticipated. The possibility that Matthew might somehow be connected to his family was too unsettling to dismiss. He needed answers, and he was more determined than ever to uncover the truth. "Lewis, I need you to keep investigating. I have to know what happened. This coincidence is too disturbing to ignore. If there's a real connection between Matthew and my family, we need to find it." Lewis nodded, resolute in his commitment to uncovering the truth. "I'll pursue every lead, Mr. Johnson. I won't stop until we know exactly what's going on." As Lewis delved further into the mystery, Michael found himself grappling with a whirlwind of emotions. The possibility that Matthew could be his biological son was something he had never allowed himself to consider until now. The coincidences were too many, too striking to be mere chance. For days, Michael wrestled with his thoughts, torn between hope and fear. The connection he felt with Matthew had grown stronger with each visit to the orphanage, and the uncertainty was becoming unbearable. He knew there was only one way to put the doubts to rest: a DNA test. On a cold, gray winter morning, Michael made up his mind. He arranged a meeting with Richard, his lawyer, to discuss the next steps. Sitting in Richard's well-appointed office, Michael spoke with a newfound determination. "Richard, I've thought this through carefully. I want to do the DNA test. I need to know if Matthew is my son. I can't keep living with this doubt hanging over me," he said firmly. Richard met Michael's gaze with understanding. "I completely agree, Michael. Given the circumstances, a DNA test is the most logical step. We'll handle everything discreetly to protect Matthew's privacy and ensure the results are accurate." The preparations for the DNA test began without delay. Richard took care of arranging the collection of samples from both Michael and Matthew, ensuring that the process was handled with the utmost professionalism and confidentiality. Michael confided in Elizabeth, who was taken aback by the news but agreed to assist in any way she could. When the day of the sample collection arrived, Michael felt a mix of nervousness and hope. He drove to the orphanage to pick up Matthew, doing his best to remain calm so as not to alarm the boy. Matthew, sensing the gravity of the day, was quiet but trusting as he climbed into the car with Michael. As they drove to the clinic, the silence between them was heavy with unspoken thoughts. Michael's mind raced with possibilities, his heart aching with the hope that this boy he had grown to love might be his flesh and blood. But there was also fear of what the truth might reveal, and fear of the emotional toll it could take on both him and Matthew. When they arrived at the clinic, Michael took a deep breath, offering Matthew a reassuring smile as they walked inside together. Whatever the outcome, Michael knew that his life was about to change forever. The truth, once revealed, would alter everything, and he was ready to face it, no matter what it might be. "Where are we going?" Michael Matthew asked, his eyes wide with curiosity as he gazed out the car window, taking in the unfamiliar scenery. "We're heading to a clinic, Matthew, just to do a little test. It's nothing to worry about, I promise." "It won't hurt," Michael replied, his voice gentle but edged with the tension he was trying to hide. He wanted to reassure Matthew, but the weight of the situation pressed heavily on his mind. As they continued driving, Matthew's attention shifted to the car's luxurious interior. "This car is amazing. I've never been in one like this before. At the orphanage, we only get to ride buses when we go on trips," he said, his voice filled with awe. Michael couldn't help but smile at the boy's enthusiasm. "I'm glad you like it, Matthew. Who knows? Maybe one day we'll go on lots of adventures together," he said, the words carrying more meaning than he could express. At the clinic, the process was swift and efficient. The nurse explained everything in a calm and friendly manner, and Matthew followed her instructions bravely, his natural curiosity overcoming any fear. Michael, on the other hand, was a bundle of nerves, his heart pounding in his chest as he watched the sample collection. Each moment seemed to drag on endlessly, the weight of what this test could reveal hanging over him like a storm cloud. Once the samples were taken, they left the clinic and made their way back to the car. On the drive back to the orphanage, Matthew's curiosity got the better of him. "Michael, why did we have to do that test?" "Is it to check if I'm sick?" Matthew asked, his innocent eyes searching Michael's face for answers. Michael took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. He wanted to be honest without overwhelming the boy. "No, Matthew, it's not to check if you're sick. It's to help us understand some important things. You're very special to me, and I want to make sure everything is just as it should be." Matthew seemed to accept the explanation, though a hint of confusion remained in his expression. "I trust you, Michael. If you say it's important, then it must be," he said, his voice filled with quiet confidence. The days that followed were a torturous waiting game. Michael could barely focus on his work, his mind constantly drifting back to the clinic, to the test, and to what the results might reveal. Every time the phone rang, his heart skipped a beat, wondering if it was the call that would change everything. His nights were restless, plagued by a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. He played out every possible scenario in his mind, trying to steel himself for whatever the outcome might be. Despite the growing tension within him, Michael continued his regular visits to the orphanage. Each visit with Matthew brought moments of joy and deepened the connection between them. They played soccer, read books, and talked about everything under the sun. Matthew's trust in Michael grew with each passing day, and Michael felt the same. The bond between them was undeniable, and with every visit, it became clearer to Michael that he was on the verge of discovering something that could change both of their lives forever. As the wait for the test results stretched on, Michael's resolve only strengthened. The truth, whatever it might be, was within reach. And no matter what the results revealed, Michael knew one thing for certain: Matthew had become an integral part of his life, and he would do whatever it took to ensure that bond remained unbreakable. The waiting days had been excruciating, but they were finally over. When the phone rang and Richard informed Michael that the DNA test results were ready, he felt a rush of mixed emotions: relief that the wait was over and anxiety about what the truth might reveal. The weight of the moment was immense. He knew that whatever the outcome, it would forever alter the course of his life. The next morning, Michael made his way to Richard's office, his heart pounding with anticipation. The drive seemed unusually long, with every stoplight and turn amplifying his unease. By the time he arrived, he felt a tight knot in his chest. Steeling himself, he took a deep breath and entered the building. Richard was already waiting for him in the meeting room, holding an envelope that was still sealed. His expression was calm, but the gravity of the situation was clear in his eyes. "Michael, the results are here," Richard said quietly, extending the envelope toward him. "If you're ready, we can open it together." Michael swallowed hard, his hands trembling slightly as he took the envelope. The room felt heavy with tension as he sat down across from Richard. With one final apprehensive glance at the lawyer, he carefully opened the envelope and pulled out the document inside. His eyes scanned the page rapidly, searching for the answer that would either confirm his deepest hope or shatter it. And then he found it. Richard spoke gently, breaking the silence. "Michael, the results confirm it. Matthew is Joseph, your biological son. He survived the accident." The words hit Michael like a tidal wave, overwhelming him with a surge of emotions. Tears filled his eyes as he struggled to comprehend the reality before him. The boy he had come to care for so deeply, the child who had unknowingly rekindled the light in his heart, was indeed his son. Joseph, whom he had mourned for so long, was alive. "He's alive. My son is alive," Michael whispered, as if saying the words out loud would make them more real. Richard nodded, giving Michael the time he needed to absorb the enormity of the revelation. "This changes everything, Michael. Now that we have proof of your biological connection, the adoption process will be much smoother. As his father, you have a direct path to bringing him home." Michael wiped the tears from his eyes, his expression transforming from disbelief to determination. "I want him to come live with me as soon as possible. He's already spent too much time away from his family, and we need to restore his name. He should be Joseph again." Richard began making the necessary arrangements. "I'll handle all the legal work. Now that we know he's your son, the process will be straightforward. We'll make sure it's done properly and as quickly as possible." As Richard made his notes, Michael sat back, his mind racing with thoughts of the future. The road ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in years he felt a sense of hope and purpose. His son had come back to him, against all odds, and he was determined to make up for lost time. In the days that followed, Michael kept his routine of visiting Matthew at the orphanage, carefully concealing the monumental news until everything was properly arranged. He wanted their reunion to be perfect, a new beginning that would signify the start of their life together as father and son. At night, however, sleep eluded him. He spent hours reflecting on the improbable journey that fate had designed for him and his son, Joseph. The overwhelming joy of discovering that Joseph was alive mingled with the lingering sorrow of the accident and the loss of Andrea. It was a bittersweet mix of emotions that only deepened his resolve to make things right. Each visit to the orphanage fortified Michael's determination to provide Joseph with the love and security he deserved. As he watched Matthew play, read, and dream, Michael could see the future unfolding, a future where Joseph would no longer be alone, where he would be surrounded by the warmth and stability of a family. Finally, the day came when Richard informed Michael that all the necessary documents were to begin the formal adoption process. The news brought a wave of relief and joy that swept over Michael. He knew there were still hurdles to overcome, but he now had a renewed sense of purpose. He was ready to be the father Joseph needed and deserved. With the DNA test confirming Matthew's true identity as Joseph, Michael was determined to expedite the adoption process. The truth had brought a profound transformation in his life, and now his singular focus was on bringing Joseph home. Although the legal process was simplified due to their biological connection, it still required navigating through legal and emotional complexities. Richard, ever the diligent and trusted lawyer, meticulously handled the paperwork, ensuring that every step was taken with care and precision. Michael, even though we've confirmed your kinship with Joseph, we still have to go through the formal adoption procedures, Richard explained during one of their meetings. This includes psychological evaluations, home visits from social workers, and submitting various documents to the court. Michael listened intently, understanding the necessity of these steps. "I'm ready to do whatever it takes, Richard. Nothing matters more to me than bringing Joseph home," he replied, his voice filled with quiet determination. As the legal process progressed, Michael knew the time had come to talk to Matthew about the adoption and reveal the truth about who he was. On one of their visits to the orphanage, Michael suggested they take a walk to the nearby park, a peaceful place where they could have an important conversation. Sitting together on a bench under the shade of a large oak tree, Michael turned to Matthew, holding the boy's small hands gently in his own. "Matthew, there's something very important I need to share with you," Michael began, his voice tender but brimming with emotion. "Do you remember the test we took a while back? The results were truly amazing. You're not just a special child to me, you're my son, my biological son. You are Joseph, the son I thought I had lost in the accident." Matthew's eyes widened, his mind racing to process the revelation. "I'm your son?" he asked, his voice trembling with a mix of surprise, hope, and disbelief. Michael nodded, tears forming in his eyes as he smiled at the boy. "Yes, Matthew, you're my son, Joseph, and I want to officially adopt you so that we can be together as a family, just like we were meant to be." Tears welled up in Matthew's eyes as well, but they were tears of joy. A radiant smile broke across his face as he threw his arms around Michael, hugging him tightly. "I always felt like you were special, Daddy. I'm so happy. I want to be part of your family too," he cried, his voice full of emotion. In that moment, as they held each other, Michael felt a deep sense of peace and fulfillment. The long, winding path that had led them to this point had been fraught with pain and loss, but it had also brought them back together. He knew there were still challenges ahead, but now he was certain of one thing: he and Joseph were ready to face them together, as a family. With the revelation made and the bond between them solidified, Michael pressed forward with the adoption process with renewed determination. Richard meticulously arranged all the necessary evaluations, and social workers conducted thorough visits to Michael's home, ensuring that the environment was not only safe but also filled with love and care for Joseph. Finally, the day of the court hearing arrived, a day that would forever change their lives. Michael, accompanied by Richard and Matthew, walked into the courtroom with a mixture of nerves and hope. The judge, a stern but kind-looking woman, carefully reviewed the documents and evaluations presented before her, listening intently as Richard outlined the case. "Mr. Johnson," the judge said, her gaze fixed on Michael, "all the documents are in order, and the evaluations clearly show that you are a capable, loving, and committed father. I see no reason not to approve this adoption. However, there is a request regarding the child's name. I would like to hear your thoughts on this matter." Michael turned to Matthew, who was standing beside him, clutching his hand tightly. He remembered their heartfelt conversations about his name and Matthew's wish to honor the orphanage that had been his home for so many years. "Your Honor," Michael began, his voice steady but filled with emotion, "Matthew has expressed a desire to keep part of his name from the orphanage as a way to honor and remember the place that cared for him. We would like to change his name to Joseph Matthew Johnson." The judge's stern expression softened into a smile. "That is a thoughtful and meaningful gesture. The adoption is hereby approved, and the child's name will be officially changed to Joseph Matthew Johnson." A wave of relief and overwhelming joy washed over Michael as the judge's words sank in. He thanked the judge, Richard, and everyone who had supported them through this journey. As they stepped out of the courthouse, Michael knelt beside Joseph Matthew, pulling him into a tight embrace. "Joseph Matthew, we're officially a family now," Michael said, his voice thick with emotion. Joseph Matthew beamed, his eyes sparkling with happiness. "I'm so happy, Daddy. Thank you for everything." "I'm happy too, son. Let's go home. We have so much to look forward to together," Michael responded, his heart full of love and hope. As Michael and Joseph Matthew settled into their new life as father and son, their days were filled with the warmth and joy that came from finally being united. They explored new hobbies together, shared stories, and built memories that would last a lifetime. Meanwhile, Louis, ever diligent, continued his investigation into the mysterious circumstances surrounding Joseph Matthew's survival and how he ended up at the orphanage. The puzzle was far from complete, and Louis was determined to piece together the missing details. After weeks of relentless research and countless interviews, Louis finally uncovered a vital lead. He tracked down a nurse named Amelia who had been working at the hospital when Joseph Matthew was brought in after the accident. However, Amelia had left the hospital under unusual circumstances shortly after the incident and had seemingly disappeared. With his exceptional investigative skills, Louis managed to trace her to a small, quiet town on the outskirts where she had been living a reclusive life. Eager to find out what Amelia knew, Louis arranged to meet her at a local cafe in the town. When he finally saw her, it was clear that she had been through a lot. She looked older than her years, her face lined with worry and regret. As they sat down to talk, Louis could sense that she was carrying a heavy burden, one that had been weighing on her for a long time. "Amelia, I appreciate you agreeing to meet with me," Louis began gently. "I'm investigating the circumstances surrounding a boy who was brought to the hospital about 6 years ago after a car accident. I believe you were involved in his care. His name is Joseph Matthew Johnson, though he was known as Matthew at the orphanage. Can you tell me what happened back then?" Amelia's eyes widened in recognition, and she took a deep, shaky breath. "I remember the boy," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It was a chaotic night. The accident was horrific. But the boy, he was so small, so fragile. He shouldn't have survived, but somehow he did. After the initial treatment, things got complicated. There were people involved, people who didn't want the truth to come out." Louis leaned in, his instincts telling him that Amelia was about to reveal something significant. "What truth, Amelia? What happened to Joseph Matthew after he was brought to the hospital?" Amelia hesitated, clearly torn between fear and the need to unburden herself. I was told to keep quiet about it. The boy's records were altered, and he was sent away without proper documentation. I don't know who gave the orders, but I was scared. I didn't want to be part of it, so I left the hospital and disappeared. I've lived with the guilt ever since." Her words sent a chill down Louis's spine. The mystery was darker and more complex than he had imagined, but with this new information, he was closer than ever to uncovering the full truth about what had happened to Joseph Matthew. Determined to bring closure to both Michael and his son, Louis resolved to follow this lead to its end, no matter where it took him. Louis, driven by a sense of justice and determined to bring closure to Michael and Joseph Matthew, arranged a discreet meeting with Amelia at a small, out-of-the-way cafe in the town where she had been living. When he arrived, he found Amelia waiting, a woman who bore the visible marks of years spent in fear and regret. Her expression was weary, but there was a steely resolve in her eyes. "Amelia, my name is Louis Vasquez. I'm a private investigator, and I'm here because of a case you're familiar with," Louis began, keeping his tone calm and reassuring. Amelia's gaze flickered with a mix of suspicion and resignation. "I knew someone would come looking for me eventually," she replied, her voice laced with a quiet acceptance. "It's been a long time, but I haven't forgotten." Louis leaned forward, his eyes intent. "I need to know what happened to baby Joseph Matthew after that accident. the truth is crucial. Amelia sighed, the weight of her memories evident in her expression. That night, it was chaotic. The baby was brought in badly injured, but he was alive. His parents didn't make it. While I was caring for him, a man approached me, offering a large sum of money to turn the baby over to him. He claimed the child would be well taken care of. But something about him felt wrong. When I refused, he threatened me. I was terrified. I didn't know what to do. So I took matters into my own hands. I took the baby and left him at the orphanage with a note containing a false story about the parent's death. It was the only way I could think of to protect him. Lewis absorbed her words, recognizing the danger Amelia had faced. Do you have any idea who this man was? Amelia shook her head slowly. No, he never gave me his name. But he had an air of power about him, like he was used to getting what he wanted. After that night, I left the hospital and went into hiding. I was too scared to stay. Lewis thanked Amelia for her courage in coming forward and assured her that she would be protected as the investigation continued. He then returned to Michael's office to share the news. In the quiet of Michael's office, Lewis laid out the details of Amelia's confession. Michael, we finally have answers. Amelia confirmed that she was coerced into giving up Joseph Matthew but chose to leave him at the orphanage to keep him safe from the man who threatened her. Michael listened in stunned silence, a mixture of anger and relief washing over him. Who was this man, Lewis, who tried to take my son? Unfortunately, Amelia couldn't identify him by name, but her information has brought us closer. What's important is that Joseph Matthew ended up at the orphanage out of a desire to protect him, not neglect. With Amelia's testimony, the authorities launched a formal investigation into the attempted kidnapping and the threats against her. Amelia, facing the prospect of legal consequences for her actions, agreed to testify and provide detailed information about the man who had approached her. Her willingness to cooperate, coupled with her actions to protect Joseph Matthew, led to leniency in her case. She was placed under witness protection while the authorities pursued the mysterious figure behind the plot. The investigation soon gained momentum, with Lewis piecing together the clues Amelia had provided. After sifting through old records, conducting interviews, and leveraging his network of contacts, Lewis identified a suspect, Alejandro Delgado, a businessman with a notorious reputation. Alejandro had been linked to various illegal activities, including document forgery, blackmail, and even kidnappings. His name had come up in connection with other shady dealings, and Lewis was confident that he had found the man responsible for the threats against Amelia and the attempted abduction of Joseph Matthew. Upon receiving this information, Lewis immediately informed Michael and the authorities. The police quickly moved to organize a sting operation to apprehend Alejandro and gather the evidence needed to bring him to justice. The operation was swift and decisive, resulting in Alejandro's arrest and the confiscation of documents that corroborated Amelia's account. With Alejandro in custody, the truth of what had happened to Joseph Matthew finally began to come to light. Michael felt a sense of closure, knowing that the man who had sought to take his son away from him would face justice. Though the road had been long and fraught with uncertainty, Michael could now focus on the future, on being the father Joseph Matthew needed and building the family they both deserved. As for Lewis, his work wasn't entirely done, but he knew the most important part of the job had been completed. Michael and Joseph Matthew were safe, together, and ready to move forward as a family, free from the shadows of the past. On the morning of the operation, Lewis accompanied the police as they prepared to raid Alejandro Delgado's mansion. The air was thick with tension as officers silently surrounded the opulent property. With a search and seizure warrant in hand, the police moved swiftly, breaching the mansion's security and catching Alejandro by surprise. The criminal, who had long evaded justice, attempted to resist and make a run for it, but he was quickly overpowered and handcuffed by the officers. Watching the scene unfold, Louis felt a profound sense of relief finally. The man who had caused so much pain was in custody. The search of Alejandro's mansion yielded a treasure trove of incriminating evidence. Forged documents were found hidden throughout the property, including falsified hospital records and counterfeit identity papers. It became clear that Alejandro had been involved in a web of illegal activities, extending far beyond the attempted kidnapping of Joseph Matthew. During his interrogation, Alejandro initially put up a defiant front, denying any wrongdoing. However, as the mountain of evidence against him grew, his resistance crumbled. Under intense questioning, he finally confessed to his role in the plot. "I saw an opportunity to make a lot of money," Alejandro admitted with a chilling lack of remorse. "I didn't care who I hurt to get it." His confession revealed the full extent of his plan. Alejandro had forged the documents to obscure Joseph Matthew's true identity, intending to sell the child to a wealthy family abroad. The authorities, now fully aware of the scope of Alejandro's crimes, not only arrested him but also dismantled his entire network of illegal operations. The news of his capture sent shockwaves through the community, exposing the dark underbelly of his dealings and bringing a sense of justice to those he had wronged. When Michael was informed of Alejandro's arrest, he was overwhelmed by a mix of emotions. Relief washed over him, knowing that the man responsible for his son's kidnapping was finally behind bars. But there was also a deep anger at the thought of the horrors Alejandro had orchestrated. Richard, ever vigilant, ensured that all the evidence was meticulously presented in court. With Alejandro's confession and the overwhelming proof, the legal process moved swiftly. Alejandro was convicted on multiple charges, including kidnapping, document forgery, and conspiracy, and was sentenced to a lengthy prison term. For Michael, Alejandro's conviction marked the end of a painful chapter in his life. The dark cloud that had hung over him since the day of the accident was finally lifting. Wanting to express his gratitude, Michael visited Louis to thank him personally for his unwavering dedication to the case. "Louis, you've done more than just bring my son back to me. You've ensured that justice was served. I can't begin to express how grateful I am," Michael said, shaking the investigator's hand firmly. "It was an honor to help, Michael. Seeing the truth come out and knowing that Joseph Matthew is safe, there's no greater reward," Louis replied with a warm smile. With Alejandro's arrest and conviction behind them, Michael and Joseph Matthew could finally begin to rebuild their lives. The mansion that had once echoed with loneliness was now filled with laughter and warmth. The bond between father and son grew stronger with each passing day as they settled into their new life together. Michael, determined to give Joseph Matthew the childhood he deserved, devoted himself entirely to his son's happiness and well-being. Michael spared no effort in making Joseph Matthew feel at home. He transformed a spacious room into a haven for the boy, filling it with all the toys and books he had ever wanted. The walls were soon covered with Joseph Matthew's colorful drawings, each one a testament to his creativity and the resilience he had shown through the years. One afternoon, as Michael hung the last of Joseph Matthew's drawings on the wall, he turned to his son with a gentle smile. "Joseph Matthew, this is your home now. I want you to always feel free to be yourself here." Joseph Matthew beamed with happiness, his eyes shining brightly. "Thank you, Daddy. I've never had a room like this before. It's perfect." As they stood together, surrounded by the joyful evidence of their new life, Michael felt a deep sense of peace. The journey had been long and fraught with challenges, but now at last he and Joseph Matthew were where they belonged together as a family. Joseph Matthew held Michael's hand tightly and added softly, "Mommy, I'm okay. Daddy takes very good care of me, and I always think of you. I hope you're proud of us." As time passed, Michael and Joseph Matthew fully embraced their new life together. The once quiet mansion was now alive with love, laughter, and hope. They spent their days discovering new hobbies like gardening and cooking together, and their evenings were filled with shared stories before bedtime, strengthening their bond with each passing moment. Inspired by their journey, Michael began speaking publicly at charity events, sharing his story to inspire others to hold on to hope, even in the darkest times. He believed that by telling his story, he could encourage people to never give up, no matter the challenges they faced. Joseph Matthew, I want you to always remember that no matter what happens, there is always hope, Michael said as they spent time together in the garden. Joseph Matthew looked up at his father with a proud smile. I love it, Daddy. I think we're going to help a lot of people. Their life became a living testament to the power of love, resilience, and perseverance. Together, they faced immense challenges and emerged stronger. They devoted themselves to helping others, guided by the belief that kindness and compassion could truly change the world. As they looked toward the future, Michael and Joseph Matthew knew that whatever life had in store, they would face it together, with hearts full of hope and minds dedicated to making a positive difference. As we come to the end of this incredible journey, we hope that Michael and Joseph Matthew's story has touched your heart and inspired you to believe in the power of love, hope, and perseverance. Life can be unpredictable and filled with unexpected challenges, but as we've seen, it's through resilience and unwavering faith that we find the strength to overcome even the darkest moments. Now, we want to hear from you. What have you learned from this story? What is one lesson you'll take with you and apply in your own life? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave your comment below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more inspiring stories. Thank you for watching.